So, hello and welcome back to Men Behind the Stats. I'm Statman Cam, and in today's video we're going to be looking at David Luiz. Inspired by his absolute horror show for Arsenal against Manchester City, we're going to be taking a look firstly at his defensive contribution, the errors he makes on a regular basis, and then we're going to look at why he gets picked. Why should someone who makes these errors on a regular basis still start for a Premier League club? And not just any Premier League club, this is Arsenal. Arsenal are a big club, and clearly they're trying to push at least for European football. Doesn't look like they'll get it this season, but they're having a go at least. So let's start with this chart, which I've labelled defensive impact. So all stats here are per 90 minutes. Along the bottom, you've got errors leading to shots per 90 minutes. So obviously the closer to the left you are, the lower that number is, the better. And going up the graph, what we've got is the expected goals minus the expected goals against. So the difference in expected goals, in other words, the expected result of that 90 minutes whilst the player's been on the pitch. So that's been averaged out across the season. Obviously in that stat you want to be as high up as you can. So the best place to be is as far left and as far up as you can on this graph. The first thing to note from this graph is where the Arsenal centre-backs are. Looking for the green dots, you've got David Luiz and Mustafi that are both negative on the expected goals difference axis. What this shows is that on average, when Mustafi and David Luiz are on the pitch, Arsenal concede more goals than they score. Now, whilst clearly this isn't solely David Luiz or Shkodran Mustafi's fault alone, it's an important stat to consider because when Arsenal brought in David Luiz from Chelsea for 8 million, they're thinking, we want him as a leader in our defence. We want him to improve our defence and take it to the next level because they were having problems with their defence before that. What this stat shows is that he's absolutely nothing of the sort. Look at where Van Dijk is, look at where Maguire is, look at Bonucci, Sergio Ramos, Aymeric Laporte as well. Look at how high up on that graph they are. That shows that when they're playing, their team scores a lot more goals than they concede. When you think of those players as leaders in your defence, that's why. The team play better when they're playing. The team defend better as a unit, and they're better going forward as well. In terms of the stats going forward, that's something we'll come on to later. But in terms of defending as a unit, it's really important that when you've got a leader like this, they do perform. And David Luiz and Mustafi, admittedly Mustafi's never seen as a leader really, but David Luiz especially, they're both just so low down on that axis that for a top club, Arsenal are never going to have a chance of competing with a defence like that. Now, if we look at along the bottom, the errors leading to shots per 90 minutes, look at where David Luiz and Mustafi are. They're higher than a lot of the other Premier League defenders. And whilst it's not a crisis on its own, because if you look at where Bonucci and Sergio Ramos are, if you think about the partnerships there, Ramos plays alongside Varane. He's got incredible recovery pace, so he's very likely to be able to get back and put pressure on the attacker and reduce the chance of that shot ending up in the back of the net. Whereas if you look at David Luiz playing alongside Mustafi, Mustafi's also constantly making errors, and neither of them are that quick, so they're not going to be able to make up for each other's mistakes. That, for me, is just another reason why Arsenal should either get rid of both David Luiz and Mustafi, or if they're going to persist with them, they've got to get in a centre-back who complements their qualities. You can't have two of the same player who are both making the exact same mistakes consistently. You've got to have someone who can cover for them. If you look at Manchester United, for example, this is why fans really want to see Eric Bailly playing alongside Harry Maguire. Because on occasion Maguire loses the ball, and clearly it's not as often as David Luiz or Mustafi, but he does sometimes lose the ball. And when that happens, you want Eric Bailly with his rapid pace to be able to recover. Whereas Victor Lindelof, he's quick but not as quick. So Bailly's added pace and physicality complements Maguire, and that's what you want to see if you're an Arsenal fan from your centre-back pairing. If you're going to persist with David Luiz, you want someone who can complement him. So, we've now looked at why Arsenal's defence is so bad, and in particular, why David Luiz was never the right person to be brought in as a leader, someone to really improve their backline and turn their defence around. He was never that man. So why was he brought in? And more importantly, why does he still get to start games? Reasoning that I see used a lot is that David Luiz has great offensive qualities. He's very good in build-up play, he's a good progressive centre-back, he's very good at playing long passes. So what we've done here is we've got a chart of looking at the progressive build-up play. So along the bottom you've got progressive distance per pass completed, and going upwards progressive distance per carry, so that's with the ball at their feet. What you can see straight away is that David Luiz is indeed in both these metrics in the mix with some of the better centre-backs. Everyone knows Leonardo Bonucci, one of his biggest strengths is those long balls, those diagonal passes that he's so good at. So it's no surprise really to see him so far up on the distance per completed pass scale. And if you look at going upwards, Harry Maguire is known for being very good at carrying the ball forwards, driving forwards on the ball and trying to set up attacks by doing that. So it should be no surprise again to see where he is on that graph. Another thing we can note from this is looking at where Laporte is here and remembering where he was earlier. Clearly that shows how much of an all-rounded, brilliant centre-back Aymeric Laporte is. He's very good at carrying the ball forward, pretty good at passing the ball forward, and defensively he makes a massive impact on the team. Now, the point of this video is concentrating on Arsenal and David Luiz in particular. So if you look at where David Luiz is here, he does well on both metrics. He's in the mix with a lot of the other good defenders, as I've said, not far off Maguire in terms of distance per carry. He's similar to Van Dijk in terms of progressive distance per completed pass. So clearly he is a decent progressive centre-back. Something that surprised me on this graph is looking at where Mustafi is. Now he's a lot higher than I thought he'd be, but it shows that in terms of creativity and drive going forwards, Arsenal actually are quite good in the centre-back department. For me, this shows why Arsenal are in the position they're in. They've got centre-backs that are good going forward, centre-backs that will help them build up, centre-backs that will help them create chances and go forward, help them dominate games, help them retain possession and sustain attacks. Unfortunately, the other side of this is because of the centre-backs they've chosen, whilst they may be fantastic going forward, defensively they're both absolutely woeful. So there are two sides of the coin, and unfortunately, Arsenal need to urgently do something about this if they want to actually get back into the Champions League anytime soon. The final stat I want to talk about is something that I've seen used a lot to discuss players. It's the pass completion rate for long balls. Now what you can see here is the long pass completion graph for all of those players that I mentioned above. And again, if you look at that, obviously some players seem to have better stats than others in this area, but it doesn't really tell us too much. And the reason for that is that a lot of the long balls that they're playing are balls for forwards to run onto. And so many different things can happen. Either the forward can mess up the control, in which case the pass doesn't necessarily lead to anything, or the forward can get held by a defender or fouled, in which case it wouldn't necessarily be registered as a completed pass. Or sometimes when it's raining, the ball can skip out of play. What this stat doesn't necessarily show as well is the impact psychologically on the forwards of having that defender in the team. So obviously when you're playing with someone like David Luiz as opposed to when he's out of the team, the forwards are more likely to make those diagonal runs, which opens up spaces for the midfield as well. So in a sense, that's why I don't like this long pass completion, because it doesn't give the full story. Obviously if you've got players who every time they get the ball try and ping it long and they don't succeed with any of them, they're getting like 10-20% pass completion, then sure, maybe you can draw a conclusion from the stat then. But for me, the rest of the time, there's too many variables with that stat, which is why I don't like it. So next time, if you see that stat about, or whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, whatever, you see that stat about, just bear that in mind, that there are a lot of different factors influencing the success of a long pass, which aren't just related to the player themselves, in a way that maybe for short passes wouldn't be the case. So, having shown David Luiz's defensive game, we've now looked at his offensive game and shown that actually he is a fairly decent centre-back in terms of progressing the ball forwards, starting attacks and being useful as a contributor in build-up play. To finish though, I think it's really important to revisit the main reason why David Luiz should not be playing Premier League games. And this also applies to Shkodran Mustafi, because as we saw from the defensive stats, he's just as bad. David Luiz has made 3 errors leading to goals since the start of the Premier League season, which is the most of any player currently. We've already seen Arsenal's expected goals minus expected goals against record with David Luiz on the pitch, and it just goes to show that with David Luiz on the pitch, Arsenal will not be able to turn around their defensive fortunes and will not become serious top 4 contenders. So thank you very much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, do smash the like button, drop a sub, and if you've got anything you want to see in a future video, DM me on Twitter or Instagram @StatmanCam and go drop a follow whilst you're at it as well. Thank you.